Welcome to China Truths. Today we will cover the following stories. Former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss warns West is too soft on Beijing. South Pacific defense ministers meet against backdrop of rising tensions. UK hands sovereignty of Chagos Islands to China-line Mauritius. Now, let's dive into the details. It's all covered in today's China Truths. Former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss warns West is too soft on Beijing. Former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss has warned democratic governments have been far too soft on the Chinese government, which she says is actively seeking to undermine overseas societies. Truss made the comments to the Epoch Times in an exclusive interview on the sidelines of the Conservative Political Action Conference in Brisbane, Australia, on October 5. The former British leader said the most effective way to challenge China is in the economic realm. I've called for the idea of an economic NATO, where countries like the US, the UK, and Australia work together to have a common economic policy towards China, to stop China undermining our industry, to stop exporting any technology that could be used against us. I think we need to get much tougher, the former leader said. She pointed to the free trade agreement known as the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, as a bulwark against Beijing, which the United States and European Union could potentially also join. Beijing has long expressed interest in joining the CPTPP, while democratic island Taiwan has also pushed hard to be admitted. Beijing views Taiwan as part of its territory, a claim the democratically elected government of Taiwan vehemently denies. The current Taiwanese government was established in 1949 following the defeat of the nationalists in China by the CCP during the Chinese Civil War, who fled to Taiwan. Meanwhile, Truss also expressed caution with the Australian Labor government's approach towards Beijing, as summed up by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in June: "We will cooperate with China where we can, disagree where we must, and engage in the national interest." Truss said this approach was not feasible. The Chinese Communist Party are actively opposed to the values that we believe in countries like the UK and Australia, and what the policy position amounts to is appeasement for short-term economic interests, as opposed to the long-term interests of freedom. "So I don't support that," she said. Treasurer Jim Chalmers most recently visited China in late September to co-chair the Fourth Strategic Economic Dialogue, aimed at stimulating the Australia-China trade relationship. The leaders pledged to share updates on the latest developments in investment policies amid an increasingly complex economic environment, as well as recognizing the importance of technical and policy exchanges on climate change goals and investment in renewable energy. Chalmers has expressed concerns that China's recent internal economic struggles could see Australian export levels drop. Softer demand for iron ore, weighed down by the slowing China economy, is also a threat to the budget bottom line, he said. In one of the Treasury's scenarios, a faster fall in iron ore and metallurgical coal prices could cost the budget $4.5 billion. The push for ongoing economic engagement with China comes as the Australian federal budget faces its own challenges with ever-increasing expenditure and slowing productivity. The Labor government has worked to rein in the costs of major social welfare programs like the National Disability and Insurance Scheme, NDIS, which has not only grown dramatically in size but is also the largest source of job creation in the country. Further, the Australian Bureau of Statistics also revealed that household expenditure in August remained largely flat, while September figures also showed the country was experiencing some of its slowest economic growth since the 1991 to 1992 financial year, growing just 0.2%. South Pacific defense ministers meet against backdrop of rising tensions. A week after Beijing launched an intercontinental ballistic missile or ICBM test aimed at the Pacific, the first time it had done so in 30 years, defense ministers from across the Pacific met for their 9th annual gathering. Overshadowing other concerns at the South Pacific Defense Ministers Meeting, SPDMM, was an evolving security landscape marked by increasing aggression from Beijing. Hosted by New Zealand, the meeting brought together defense ministers, chiefs of defense, and secretaries of defense from New Zealand, Australia, Fiji, France, Tonga, Chile, and Papua New Guinea, as well as observers from Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The SPDMM provides a forum for Pacific countries to develop joint strategies, enhancing their defense capabilities and their ability to protect their collectively vast exclusive economic zones, EEZs. New Zealand Defence Minister Judith Collins noted the recent missile launch, acknowledged that the Pacific was facing a very difficult geopolitical situation compared to 10 or 15 years ago, and stressed the need for collective action to ensure regional security. "What we're seeing is unprecedented from my experience and reading of history," she said. Action in the Pacific and also in Europe and in the Middle East, all together, all at one time, the enormous support that we need to be able to give to our neighbors is pretty clear. In a region this size, it is vital we work together to produce regional solutions to regional problems. The presence of the observer nations illustrates the importance Australia and New Zealand place on their security partnerships outside the region, including Five Eyes. Collins was evident in her support for those connections, saying, "We would have very little intelligence capability without our friends." She admitted that much of New Zealand's military equipment is outdated, with many assets almost antique. However, she pointed to recent acquisitions, such as the P-8A Poseidon surveillance aircraft, C-130J-30 Hercules, and the uncrewed surface vessel Bluebottle, as the first signs of the current government's determination to increase investment in defense. The 6.8-meter remote-controlled Bluebottle, powered by renewable energy, can undertake information surveillance reconnaissance duties, including fishery and border protection, and provide meteorological data. "We all want to see regional security, and that means protecting our maritime areas, improving the effectiveness of our defense forces, and adapting to the impacts of climate change," Collins said. She also noted that Pacific countries would all benefit from working together and sharing knowledge on issues such as humanitarian aid. Members agreed on the importance of working with civilian agencies when it comes to supporting humanitarian assistance and disaster relief efforts, and in the areas of combating maritime security threats such as illegal, unregulated and unreported fishing and transnational organized crime, Collins said. These are issues that have a significant impact on many South Pacific nations which, like New Zealand, have large exclusive economic zones. In the past, the militaries of Pacific Island nations have been collectively deployed in response to cyclones, earthquakes, landslides, volcanic eruptions, bushfires, and floods to return stability to damaged and devastated communities. That action will soon be coordinated through the Pacific Response Group or PRG, which SPDMM ministers endorsed and called for its establishment immediately. There will also be a PRG Pacific Special Advisory Team, SAT, a small, rapidly deployable group available to support civilian authorities and other organizations in an affected state in planning a disaster response and identifying potential follow-on tasks. It will be co-located in Brisbane during the upcoming high-risk weather season for rapid mobilization. Also present at the meeting for the first time was the Pacific Islands Forum or PIF, represented by its Secretary General Baron Waka. Despite tension at the recent forum meeting in Tonga over its attitude to Taiwan, with Beijing demanding and getting any mention of the island nation removed from the recent PIF communique, and revelations it was subject to a malicious cyber attack blamed by the Australian Cyber Security Centre on Beijing, Waka maintained the greatest security threat to the region was climate change. But pressed on the issue of Beijing aggression, he said, "We would like to keep the Pacific a peaceful area, a peaceful zone that we have everyone acknowledge and respect, and with this ballistic missile test in the Pacific, in our region, is a big, big concern for us, and we say to China a big no, no." UK hands sovereignty of Chagos Islands to China-line Mauritius. The UK has agreed to a deal to hand over sovereignty of the Chagos Islands, in the Indian Ocean, to Mauritius but said the status of the US military base on Diego Garcia will be preserved. Diego Garcia, which hosts an air base that was crucial during the 2003 Iraq War, is one of more than 60 islands in the archipelago, and the United States has had a presence there since 1966. Mauritius became independent in 1968, but it has always claimed it was forced to give up the Chagos Islands as a condition of being released from the British Empire. British Foreign Secretary David Lammy said on October 3, "Today's agreement secures this vital military base for the future. It will strengthen our role in safeguarding global security, shut down any possibility of the Indian Ocean being used as a dangerous illegal migration route to the UK, as well as guaranteeing our long-term relationship with Mauritius, a close Commonwealth partner." The deal was immediately criticized by former British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, one of 4 candidates competing for the leadership of the opposition Conservative Party. Cleverly posted a link to the news on social media platform X, and wrote, "Weak, weak, weak. Labour lied to get into office. Said they'd be whiter than white, said they wouldn't put up taxes, said they'd stand up to the EU, said that they'd be patriotic. All lies." The UK has been negotiating with Mauritius over the Chagos Islands since November 2022. In December 2023, Conservative lawmaker Daniel Kowalczyński told the Epoch Times it would be a mistake to hand over the Chagos archipelago to Mauritius, which he described as a client puppet state of China. Mauritius has a close relationship with China, and last month, the Bank of Mauritius and the People's Bank of China signed a bilateral currency swap agreement. The two countries have also signed a free trade agreement, which came into force in 2021. Mauritian Prime Minister Pravind Jugnauth has been the leader of the Militant Socialist Movement, MSM, since 2003. Mauritius is holding elections in November, and the return of the Chagos Islands could boost the MSM, which holds 42 of the 70 seats in the Mauritian parliament. Around 2,000 Chagos Islanders, sometimes known as Chagosians, were forcibly relocated to the UK in the 1970s to clear the way for the expansion of the airbase, and they will now be allowed to return home as part of the deal, although Diego Garcia will remain out of bounds. This government inherited a situation where the long-term, secure operation of the Diego Garcia military base was under threat, with contested sovereignty and ongoing legal challenges, Lamy said. In a joint statement, the UK and Mauritius said the deal had the support and assistance of the United States and India. The UK had exercised control over the region since 1814 but separated the Chagos Islands from Mauritius in 1965, creating what became known as the British Indian Ocean Territory. It was one of the UK's last remaining overseas possessions, most of which are in the Caribbean or the South Atlantic. In February 2019, the International Court of Justice ruled that the UK should give up control of the islands, saying it had wrongfully forced the population to leave in the 1970s. Later that year, the UN General Assembly voted by 116 to 6 that the UK should unconditionally withdraw from the archipelago within 6 months. The UK, Australia, Israel, Hungary, the Maldives, and the United States voted against the resolution, with 56 countries abstaining. The UK has 13 remaining overseas territories: Anguilla, Ascension Island, Bermuda, the British Antarctic Territory, the British Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands, the Falkland Islands, Gibraltar, Montserrat, Pitcairn Island, St. Helena, Tristan da Cunha, and the Turks and Caicos Islands.